Hello and welcome to Simon Says Artwork. In this video I'm going to be using these Pigma Micron pens and I'll be drawing on the packaging that it came in. So I've never used these before. I really like fine liners, but I see a lot of professionals use these, and they've got a nice range of pens which go from the brush pen, the 01, which is 0.01, up to 0.08, and then the 1, which is a chunky kind of bullet tip nib. So anyway, I'll be using a few of these pens to draw on this lovely cardboard packaging. So okay, let's get started. This is when I got my Pigma Micron pens, and immediately I thought if I take apart the packaging I can do a nice little test on the brown cardboard, because I quite like this colour of packaging. I think it's a nice light brown with a bit of a, I don't know, a bit of a speckled look to it. It's not completely clean and flat. You know, you can sort of see discrepancies in it. So I thought I'll try a 0.03 nib, which is about in between, I think, about a medium nib, and just start to score some wavy lines across it from one direction to another. I quite like diagonals, so as much as I'll let the lines wobble, I'll try to go in a certain direction, because I think that if everything follows a general diagonal shape, it sort of shows movement and motion and flow, and then you can get away with a lot of things like this split in it. I was planning on doing a lot of variants for this, not really planning, but when that happened, when I saw that I'd split one of the lines into two, I thought I could split loads of lines into loads of different branches, but it became complicated enough as it is, so I've slowed it down in little pieces like this so that you can see this is how I gauge how I'm going to try to make the lines connect. And I quite like that line. I think it's quite a nice flow to that line. It's got great movement to it, and this follow line to connect the whole thing becomes thicker and thinner in different parts, which I think really makes it quite nice. Things like that are just character to an otherwise straightforward illustration. So the concept I was going for is just motion in otherwise, I suppose, inanimate lines, wires, cables, things which aren't really animated, all of a sudden look as though they're springing to life and suggest technology, even though there's nothing really too science fiction going on here. It's all things which exist. It's just brackets and wires. But it has this hint of sci-fi or just suggestion of the future or some sort of technology. I quite like the idea of mirroring this bracket, which I use, because as much as I do it as a clip on the top to separate the lines from each other and to suggest that there is a channel that they're going through, I thought if I give it a lower half, it just gives it that bit more 3D reality. So I add another structure here, and there was nothing in mind specifically. Partly I was thinking of bracelets that you see women wear, where they're really clasped on and they're quite chunky. And I thought that can be quite a decent structure of a bracelet that you sometimes see women wear. So I thought if I could construct that, it could be some sort of a channel or a bridge that things go through. I do find that strange things, I mean, rarely jewellery. I usually think of, I suppose it's a type of jewellery, watches or I'll tell you something which I've used is a fountain pen, which if you draw it from a weird angle and you only draw part of it, it just looks like something else. I find things like that are quite nice for trying to play with design and to reimagine how things can become something else and look as though they're functional as something completely different. So for the fountain pen, I'd basically used the nib turned upside down as a train in a comic book that I drew, because it was supposed to be based in the future. It looked like a futuristic design of a train to me. It was just an idea. Things like that I think are quite interesting, to try to look at normal objects and use them to transform something that you're drawing into something which seems like it has design from the future. And then adding bits of lines and bars suggests segments, and I tried to use perspective, as you can see from the downward lines. That's something which I might do a tutorial on in the future, but for the time being it's just trying to follow the direction of the curvature. If you're projecting something into 3D space, it's quite a complicated idea. That's why, sorry, I don't know if you can hear that, that's seagulls outside my window. Trying to follow something in 3D space, and then to honour that, you follow it around corners and try to drop it down. But that does take a bit of study and observation of real life, and that's something which I'll cover in a tutorial at some point. Now I've gone on to a thicker nib, and I think this initially is a 0.5, and then I give up on that, and instead I find in the pack there's it's like a felt nib that's almost like a brush tip, and I start using that instead because it's much easier to get thicker lines to draw the shadow. So at the moment I'm using the 0.05, I keep saying that wrong. You can see here, because I'm going back and forth trying to thicken up the line. And then at some point I just notice there's a much more suitable pen for shadow. Plus it's picking up fibres from the surface, which was a little irritating, I must admit. But things like this shouldn't be so laborious. On paper it's not usually like that. So that's where I give up on the 0.05. Then I find this felt nib, and it's much more suitable. It just glides along with a much thicker line. Gives a lot of depth, because if I only add a thick shadow line to one side, then it looks almost like a shadow line. And because this is a line drawing and it's not going to have any shading or hatching in it, I wanted it to have a certain sense of depth. And that was the idea, to add a bit of thickness, a bit of line weight to certain parts and not to others, and then it would just give it this quality. I thought it worked out quite nice. I still need to draw the top section, but I might separate the two and make them completely different drawings. I'm not sure at the moment. But for the time being, I find that these pens are really useful. They're a nice set of fine liners, and I thought it was quite a cool drawing. Okay, that's the drawing done. I think it looks quite nice. I think it's got a good sense of depth to it. Sort of looks like it looks like part of an animation sequence to me. I could see it being animated and moving, but I don't know if I'm going to go into that sort of detail with it. But I do think that it's got a sense of depth to it, which I quite like. A bit of movement and flow to it as well. I really enjoyed using these pens. I thought they were really nice, and compared to the fine liners that I'm used to using, they were actually really quite smooth and quite technical. And I used them on cardboard, so this packaging did start to have like little bits of fibres for the nibs. But when it came to using the brush pen for the underline part there, it wasn't bad at all. It was mainly just for the nibs of the 0.3 and 0.8 did I use, or 0.5. Either way, whichever ones I used, that's where I could start noticing bits of fibres coming up. And it just wasn't quite as smooth as I needed it to be, so I'm going to try it on paper instead. But either way, I hope you liked the video. If you did, please leave a like, comment down below, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell, and I will see you in the next video.